Hi everyone, it's Jerry. This is Game 3 from the 2016 World Chess Championship match between our current champion Magnus Carlsen, playing on the white end, and challenger Sergey Karjakin. 2 draws going into Game 3. Let's see how it would play out. E4 by Carlsen, Karjakin replying with E5. We have another Ruy Lopez. We saw this in Game 2. Where Carlsen with black played a6 here. Karjakin is playing knight f6 in this game 3. Castles, knight takes e. Rook e1. We may once again see a Berlin at some point in the match, where on this move 5, instead of rook e1, there can be d4, which would enter that popular queenless middle game position. We'll have to see about that. In this game, it's rook to e1. Knight d6, the e-pawn is regained. Bishop e7, white preserves the light square bishop. There go the knights. Castles, d4, bishop f6, rook e2. This is the first moment where we had a think. Karjakin spent nearly, about 25 minutes on his next move, move 10. Now, the most popular move from this position is to bring the rook all the way back. So I imagine Karjakin was trying to work out some of the differences between the two rook posts and trying to determine what exactly white had up his sleeve. Maybe there was some preparation with having the rook on e2 instead of e1. I am miles away from knowing all the details surrounding these two posts. However, I would like to share at least one with you. If rook e1 was played, this is a very common follow-up to immediately contest the e-file. Now there's a couple things that happen when the rook plays to e8. Black is prepared to, given a move, to capture on e1, and of course the white queen would have to recapture, and she is not an improved piece. She is still a piece that is on rank 1. Okay? Also, if white captures the rook, the knight is prepared to recapture so that the d-pawn is free and the bishop can be deployed along the more natural diagonal, c8 to h3. In the game, because rook e2 is played, now if black were to follow up with rook to e8, white can maintain this tension. White doesn't have to, let's say, capture the rook, and instead, white can play bishop f4. And in the event of rook takes rook, notice now, again, this is just one little detail, notice now that if black initiates that capture, white can recapture with the queen and improve this time around. She is not on e1, she is no longer a first rank queen. The rook can soon come over, and white can have some nice control over the only open file on board, the e-file. If bishop takes pawn, were the follow-up, well, there can be c3, and there is compensation for being down a pawn. This is a weakened structure, okay? Just wanted to highlight one difference between the two. In one case, the queen is not improved. She's having to recapture on e1. In the other case, she may be improved by recapturing on e2, so that rook e1 can come about that much more quickly. Okay, well, in the game, after about 25 minutes, Karjakin played b6, instead focusing on bishop to b7, maybe bishop to a6. Carlsen saw this as something he wants to now preserve, the light square bishop, rook to e1. So now white is going to try and work against the b6 pawn at some point. There's some queenside squares that have been influenced by the rook to e2 move, right? Black felt that it was better to play b6, bishop b7. Well, now things can change some. It's a little bit more lively on the queen side. Possibilities for an a-pawn advance to bite at b6, etc. Okay. Rook to e1 was played, avoiding bishop a6 and the light square bishop exchange. Rook e8 now. Bishop f4. The rooks are exchanged. Queen e7. This is a poison pawn. After the queen recaptures on e1, we had queen e7, but if bishop takes d4, there would follow bishop takes knight. And if black recaptures, queen e4. And that's a double attack against the bishop and rook, carrying this out just a little bit more. Bishop takes b2, queen takes a8, bishop takes rook, and at the end of it, white gets to take advantage of the pinned bishop. White goes on to win. One other variation is that if black on this move 13 grabs the pawn, bishop takes pawn. Suppose black says, well, I know if I take the bishop, there'd be queen e4, therefore I'm not going to take the bishop, I'm going to grab the pawn one move sooner. Well, white can take advantage of black's back rank. Who's the only defender of e8? Who's the only one stopping queen e8 mate? It's the queen. So white can look to deflect the queen. Queen takes bishop, runs it into a mate in 1, and queen f8 allows knight d2. And after the smoke clears, what do we have? White with the two minor pieces versus black's rook in pawn. White is the better side here, in the computer's eyes, by close to 1 point. It's a 1.25 advantage, something close to that. Okay, short story, this pawn, not a good one to capture. Queen e7 in this game. Knight c3, bishop b7, queens are now exchanged. Here comes a4, looking to make use of this provoked b6 move, trying to take advantage of it, trying to get in a5 and maybe a6. Black doesn't allow this pawn to get such great depth. a6, preparing to meet a5 with b5, a very common idea. Now g3. One of these two squares is eyed up. There might be a little punch thrown at d7 that is unprotected. Now g5, most committal move in the game, very weakening move. 4 holes created on the king side. And a big question is thrown to the bishop. This is an annoying piece to black. Puts pressure on the knight, indirect pressure on the pawn, restricts the bishop. He has a defensive responsibility. g5 is a sharp move, a weakening move, aggressive move, but a good move. The best move, in the computer's eyes, really likes g5. Bishop takes knight. Black now has the bishop pair. White looks to neutralize that right away, exchanging one of those bishops. And we now arrive at an imbalanced endgame. That only imbalance being a knight versus bishop, everything else being equal. A pawn for a pawn, b pawn for b pawn, etc. No structural imbalances. f5. If black isn't careful, this knight may look to sneak into this f5 square, but black addresses this well with these next few moves. f5 grabs some kingside space, forms a pawn duo, allows the king to now approach the center. Knight d5, king f7, defending f5, challenging the bishop. He's out of the way. And this is now stopping the black rook from getting active. And now rook to d8. That's a very awkward move, but a best move, top move by the computer. It's a move that anticipates knight to e5. Black wants to be able to meet knight e5 with possibly bishop d6, challenging the knight straight away. So, I mean, it's a very awkward looking move to go from a closed file to a closed file, but it's anticipating this little knight improvement. Rook to d8, again, is a good move. It doesn't allow this knight e5 move to hit with tempo. f4 follows. G takes f, G takes f. And now play is heating up some on the queen side. That's hitting with the fork. The A file's now opened up, knight e3. Black takes away the d5 square. This knight is under control. Notice all forward moves. Not that one. All of these forward moves are taken out, all under control by Team Black. The rook no longer has that responsibility of defending d7. So the white king improves. The rook gets on with doing something exciting instead of staring at his own pawn. That's an open file, and there are some things to bite at. The d pawn, the b pawn, which one will he hit? This knight can't move forward. There's not a better square for the knight, so yes, this is an open file, but what good is it? You don't want to stare at your knight for the rest of the game. Rook g1. That's an open file as well, and the f pawn is maybe close to being captured, right? Rook to g5. We're at move 30. This is an important moment in the game. What was played? Rook to a2. And this is where black starts to go a little bit astray. There is a little change in the evaluation here. Instead of rook to a2, the game move, rook a2, there are a couple approaches here. One is to play, well, both are centered around the g5 square. You could play bishop h6 or even h6. I was saying this during the game that there may be some drawback connected with h6. There is. It would weaken the g6 square, and white could look to enter. As an example, h4, rook h4. You can secure that. White can drop a pawn, but soon white would get it back. In the end, it's a balanced position. This rook is very active. The b pawn has been exchanged for the f pawn. Equal position. Black can play h6, in other words. Black can also play it where the bishop defends against rook to g5, and the g6 square is not weakened. We could have as a follow-up, if black played bishop h6, we can have a follow-up of rook g3, rook a4, and who knows, maybe we would have had a little bit of a back and forth and a draw would be agreed to. That did not happen in this game. This was a marathon and a half, and this game went well over 30 moves. Close to a 7-hour game, in fact. Rook a2 was played on this move 30. And again, something changes with the evaluation. Let's see what follows. b3 saves the pawn. The knight is there to defend c2. Black tries to challenge the knight now. c5. Right? If d takes c, bishop takes c, preparing to snip the knight, grab the pawn. This tension is maintained. White goes after a big fish. Rook g8. Throws a stronger punch. Keeps this tension here. King f7 does two things. Strikes at the rook and no longer defends the f5 pawn. So now the rook can move. Instead of coming all the way back to g1, which is where he was just a moment ago, he now drops back to g2. Slight improvement now. The rook is now also there to defend c2. He's also on a light square. It's not on a dark square where the bishop can hit him. And now white is prepared to grab on f5, and there isn't a good way to defend this pawn. You may be wondering, well, can't the king just step up and there, he's defended? Well, there's an issue with that. If in this position, black followed up with king to f6, white can capture the pawn, and after bishop takes pawn, there's knight takes f5. Preparing what? A skewer tactic. King takes knight, rook g5, there goes the bishop, and not only do we have white up a pawn, but it is in a position to defend c2, and it's a very active rook. Maybe at some stage the b pawn gets picked up. So, what does black do? Captures on d4. Knight takes f. This pawn is going to fall. There's no way around it. Bishop c5 is no good. After king e4, he will be picked up next. So, black tries to gain a little something. He's not just going to give up a pawn for no cost at all. He plays d3, saying, yes, you could win the pawn, and white does, but at least now it's not a BC structure, but rather a BD structure. Isolated pawns are now present. In fact, all pawns now on board are isolated. They're broken up with the d3 move. It's very important that black keep the rook on board to not only keep the king in check, but really the whole white position in check, to poke around and throw some punches at maybe the b pawn, the d pawn, the h pawn. He does that in this game. Rook a1, knight d4, b4, the bishop's on his home square. He's defending the b pawn now. White improves the rook a little bit. Black keeps pressure on the pawn, so now the next step would be to try and undermine the defender with, let's say, bishop c5, bishop g7, grab the b pawn next. White gives a check. Now rook b5. Rook is giving check to white. Let's see where the king goes. He's slipping up to the f5 square. The d pawn now has pressure, hitting white where he is weakened. That pawn doesn't have a defender. Now rook to e5. This was another turning point in the game, a little evaluation shift. This is not a best move, rook e5. The computer suggests a check, followed up with knight to f3, and this has a couple interesting moves in mind. Knight to e5 or g5, both are hitting with check. The d pawn is indirectly defended. That would pick up the rook. That would be a serious blunder, but just carrying this out, this variation a little bit further, this rook to b8 move, move 42, bishop d6, knight g5, rook h8, this pawn could be won, but so too can the h pawn, and the b pawn can be defended with this cool move, rook h3. Notice the knight's position, and the rook is there to defend the b pawn, and the h pawn can maybe start to get rolling. White did not go for this variation. Maybe did not see these this little point with, in the end, rook to h3. I'm not quite sure. He didn't go in for rook to b8 at this moment here. Instead, rook to e5. And now that was to inconvenience the king, push him away from defending the d pawn, so that rook d5 is hitting with a punch. The d pawns are now exchanged. And now the rook is staying active. Both pawns being observed. The b and h pawn. Here's how white defends the h pawn. A check, rook e2. Bishop g7. And knight to c6. What to do here for black? What would you do? Grab the b pawn. It's poison. There were many cases in this game where not only, well, the b pawn was poisoned many times in this game, and also the f pawn. Let me show you why grabbing the pawn is not good. if rook takes b, this allows knight check. King only has two options. If he goes to g8, it allows a check and the win of the bishop. The other option is king f8. This allows knight e6, king g8, rook g2, picks up the bishop, and king f7 allows knight g5 check. King g8, we would have a similar thing happening, taking advantage of the bishop, winning the bishop, and one more. If king f8, this allows knight takes pawn with check, and that's just not any pawn. That's a pawn that was controlling g6. King g8, king g6, mate is now right around the corner. Short story, that's a poison b pawn. Black notices this and says, I need to flush your king back. Rook h5. He doesn't take the bait. King has to go to the fourth rank. King g4. Rook c5. This rook is getting a workout, challenging the knight now. That's a check. King g6. If black would like to lose, that would be a good way to do it. That's mate. King g6. Knight is attacking the rook. h5. Black's not so quick to budge with the rook. He played to the fifth rank to flush the king back to the fourth rank, and now with h5, is pushing the king back to the third rank. Rook c3, king e4, white steps up. Bishop f6, this pawn is yet again poison. Rook g2, rook to g2, and there goes the bishop. There's a cost connected with grabbing that pawn. It's poison. Bishop f6, rook e3, and now h4. It's important that black does not grab the rook. This is not a good position to be in where white just has a pawn plus. They can improve the knight. There's nothing for the bishop to attack. Black is really asking for trouble trading rooks like this. However, do know that black can maintain this tension. He can keep the rook posted on c3 and does, playing on this move 54 h4. If white exchanges rooks, black would recapture with the pawn, and this is a big difference. This is a pass pawn now, who is only a couple steps away from promotion. King d3, king f5, and after knight c7, there's bishop to d8, knight to d5, and black can give up that pawn, get the f-pawn in exchange, and this will turn out to be a draw. Short story is, yes, the rooks can be exchanged, but black wants to make sure that if they do, they get a passed pawn. So the rook stays put, h4 is in, white stops any further advance with h2, fixing a pawn on a dark square, but these are two pawns that are in white's position. Black's pawns here, the b4 and h4 pawn. Let's see how play follows. Rook c2, knight check, king f7, knight d7. This is a lengthy game, a 78 move game, an exhausting game, one that you could probably hear in my voice. Rook d1. There's a check. This knight is eyeing up a couple checks. Rook d4, king f3. Bishop g5 looking to dislodge the rook and land a check, hitting the king and both pawns. That happens. Rook e4, rook d3, king g4, rook g3. Saves the bishop and does so with a punch. King is now worked to the edge. Bishop e7, and now knight e5. Black has to be very careful. One wrong step, that's a big problem. King f6, knight g4. What to do with the king? This is another case where we have a poison pawn. Will Karjakin take it? No. King f7. Best move. What would happen if the king grabbed the pawn? Let's see. If black captured the pawn, rook check, That's an only move. Now you take the bishop. That's an important intermediate check. Now if rook takes h, well, rook takes b, there's king takes h, and white is up a full piece. No problems to convert this one. What would you do, though, if black grabs the h-pawn? Check. And on king g3, this is a cool move. I did not highlight this when I was watching the game. Knight f2, where does the rook go? He only has one square. And now there comes a check, king h3, another check. What is happening here? White is forcing the rook exchange. White is winning the h-pawn, and white will soon win the b-pawn and the game. One last variation is this one here, a much simpler variation. Check instead of king g3. Suppose here. Simple enough. That's a fork, and that's the ball game. He doesn't take the bait. He doesn't take the poison. King f7. Rook e6 follows, cutting the king off, preparing to give a check, and force the king somewhere other than f6. Where will that somewhere else be? Let's see. This is another case where the b-pawn is poison. The h-pawn, however, is not. Rook takes h3. Knight e5, king g7. This seems really odd to make this move, right? Black is dropping the bishop, no? Yeah, well, if he goes here, or here, knight g6 hits. Or even f6 in this case. But yeah, king f8, knight g6. There goes the bishop, so king g7 is the best move. This allows the bishop to be picked up with check, king f6, hitting everything. Knight c6. Now it's black to move, and there are two pawns that black can take, and both of them are poison. Let me show you first what would be wrong with rook takes b. That would allow rook e6, and on king takes f5, knight d4. Hits the rook, well, hits the king with check, defends the rook, and after the king moves, there goes the rook. That one's simple enough. The other variation is after rook takes b, check. Suppose the king goes to one of these two. Well, he's going to soon end up in some kind of a mating net, f6, and something like this. The knight and the pawn are controlling a lot of squares. A wall is being formed soon, and yeah, that'll be mate soon enough. Mate in 3 it's calling for. The b-pawn should not be captured, and as mentioned, the f-pawn should not be captured either. That too is poison. The best move in this position is rook c3 challenging the knight post. We don't have that. We have finally Karjakin taking the poison. This is not a good move to capture on f5, and this is now approaching a +2 advantage for white. White is in the driver's seat and has a winning advantage. Let's see what follows. Knight a5, defending the b3 pawn. Rook h1. Keep in mind that this is a passed pawn, and he is very close to taking off. The rook can get out of his way and promotion, right? As soon as the rook moves somewhere along the first rank, he's still protecting that final square that he's defending that promotion square. Rook to b7. So right around here, this is again close to a +2 advantage, but now it is Carlsen who slips up some. Rook b7 was not a good move. It's looking to hunt down this pawn, but timing is the biggest factor in this endgame here. The timing is just not right for white to be able to hunt down the h-pawn and save the knight. You'll see exactly what I mean soon enough. Instead of rook to b7, the game move rook to b7, let me show you what would have been the correct continuation. That is to give a check, flush the king a little bit away to give the white king some space. If king e4, king g4, can't show all the variations, but this is one I would like to highlight. Rook f7, king e6, and now rook f2. This is a cool move. What is this doing? This is prepared to put pressure on the h2 pawn. For example, h3, king h4, it's important he go to h4. We don't want to allow the rook to make a move with check. King h4, and on h2, now we have the cool move rook a2. Seems very odd, but the idea here is to not allow the rook to move and throw a punch. Keep in mind, no matter where the rook moves, a threat is already there in that of h1 equals queen. So what you definitely don't want to allow to happen here is a rook move where he's throwing a punch. What is rook a2 doing? It's defending against rook a1, where the knight would be attacked and the pawn would be threatening to promote. White will go on to win this. King d5, king g3, king d4, and, well, one of the suggestions is rook to c2, king to e3. You could actually pick up the rook right around this point, and this will be a winning position for white. Okay? This was not played. This idea of rook f7 and then posting the rook up on that second rank. Rook b7 instead, white is going pawn hunting. Rook a1 is now on board. White gives a check. The king still moves forward. Black knows that yes, this pawn will be picked up with check. Black knows that he is soon to be down a full piece, a full knight down, but look at how far away the knight is from helping to stop this passed h-pawn. Look at how far away. Okay, he looks like he's close to the pawn. The white king looks like he's close to the h-pawn, and he is, but it's not good enough. Rook takes b, king g3. This pawn is ready to take off. He's a long ways away. How do you stop the h-pawn? Really? You can't. Well, you could stop the h-pawn, but you can't stop the h-pawn and save your knight. That's really the big issue. You cannot do both. King f2. The knight is hit. This pawn is ready to go. Knight c4. The knight is saved, but here comes the h-pawn. How do you stop him? Rook h4. King g3. Rook g4. King f2. A draw is agreed. White is up a minor piece, but it doesn't matter. Notice the quality of this passed pawn compared to this one. 2 steps away. There is great value, clearly, in that. A draw is agreed here. What more can be tried? Rook g4, king here, rook h4, king g3. Suppose the knight tries to do something in this position, right? Instead of this rook check in the game, suppose the knight tries to get into a position where he could give check to the king. Uh-oh. Check. There goes the rook and the game. So there's that issue as well. Because black has tension, has pressure on the rook, if the knight tries to go anywhere, rook a5 is on board and the rook will be lost. So again, at this point here, after move 78, after what was nearly 7 hours of chess, these guys agree to a draw. Carlsen's up a knight, but it's not good enough. Again, the quality of this pawn, it's big. It's a super valuable pawn, just 2 steps away from queening. What a game. This is what you would certainly call a fighting draw. Draw in the end, but certainly a fighting draw. Much different game. This game 3, much different than game 2. If we have a look at the graph like I've been providing for the first couple games, let's have a look here. Just playing through it. Some more even, a little flat line going all the way up to that move 30. That was the Rook A2 moment. And there was an advantage, something close to 0.75 at times, a little bit over a pawn, and then, yeah, something significant, but it dropped right around here with this Rook to B7 move, and a couple accurate moves later, or well, really just a couple moves later, it was back down to even. Yep, white is up a knight, but it's not a goose egg, but yeah, a goose egg on the evaluation. It's even. Another draw on board with the final tally here. 1 inaccuracy, 1 mistake, no blunders by Carlsen, and 2 inaccuracies, no mistakes, no blunders on Karjakin's end, both having an average centi pawn loss of 9 in this one. So still even after 3 games. This is without question the most exciting game of the match. 1.5 points apiece. Who knows what is in store for game 4? I look forward to covering it. As usual, feel free to leave any feedback in the comments section below, and we will see what happens in game 4. That's all for now. Take care. Bye.